On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk Azione's cybersecurity insurance policies, Silicon Labs buys Sigma, and Consumer Technology announces their 2018 Legacy Award winners. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 97, The New Dinosaurs.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by FSR and by SDVOE, the platform for networked AV.
Welcome to ResiWeek. This is your weekly wrap-up of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And today I'm pleased to be joined by John Clancy. He's the VP of Residential for Crestron. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us again. If you missed last week's one-on-one with myself and John, we talked all about their new Crestron's new 2018 roadmap. There was a bunch of goodies in there, and I asked hard-hitting journalistic questions that had John on the ropes all day long.
I'd be beaten up.
I know. I'm such a friendly Canadian. Last but not least, coming to us from his office full of guitars, we have Joe Whitaker. He is the president and owner of The Thoughtful Home. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Glad to be here again.
Have you recovered from your Texans loss again?
There's no recovery, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel either. I feel like a Browns fan at this point.
They almost had it too. I
know. And I do got a comment, John. That was a great show covering the Crestron stuff. Very, very informative.
Oh, thank you.
Again, it was those hard-hitting questions.
Well, I do have to say that a lot of those points he put on there were very, very, very factual, and the onboarding process and the stuff you have to go through and how legit it is, especially for the service part, that is a real deal. And it's part of what, brought me back in the fold. I mean, it's serious business.
Very good. All right, gentlemen, let's kick this off. This comes to us from Residential Systems. Azione Unlimited has introduced an exclusive cybersecurity initiative and insurance program. What this is they are offering their buying group a nationwide cybersecurity initiative that allows their custom installation members to have direct access to their exclusive cyber liability insurance program and rates through Alper Services, which is a trusted business insurance and financial solutions provider. What gets interesting with this is, as we know, we're to the point where cybersecurity and everything that we're putting into homes is sitting on the network is susceptible to security issues and cyber risks. Joe, I want to start with you on this one. When you read through that article specifically and get down to the range of data for essentially non-physical fires versus a physical fire, whereas they say that an actual fire with flames and heat and smoke and water and fire department people all over the place is going to cost the average business somewhere around $19,000. But a non-physical fire, i.e. cybercrime, is going to cost a business in the neighborhood of $190,000. Those figures are from 2015. Joe, you and I have talked cybersecurity and the need for cybersecurity in a lot of our conversations. Is it time now that we've actually, really start to address this from a business case standpoint of, you look at those numbers. Those numbers are dramatic. Not only would that cost them, what does that mean for the firm that maybe put in that device that caused that breach?
See, this article and the theory behind it is concerning to me. While the initiative it's a great initiative, but most of us contractors in our space, you have your contractor liability, right? Mm-hmm. Well, through that, it's funny. before this came out last week, I just had a conversation about this, is that you can, through that same provider, you can also get professional insurance, which covers, I had a bad day and I designed a system bad. There's coverage for that. But those same companies we already use already offer cybersecurity clauses. They're already there. So this approach is concerning to me because to me, those numbers are low, 19 and 190, physical and non-physical fires. 190 for a business, I believe, is low. It's a low number.
Yeah.
But they're addressing the insurance portion of it, not the how to or the solution to stop it or curb it. Or this would have been much more interesting to me if it said, Azione Unlimited introduces an initiative to teach HTPs how to stop or curb cybersecurity, theft identity, all of that. That's compelling to me. Well, this is a cover your butt statement.
Yeah, but hold on. In their statement or in the article, it says that through presentations at their conferences, they've been working to raise awareness, yada, yada, yada. So they're doing something. Now, granted, I have not been in those conferences. I don't know to what extent that is, but it sounds like they're at least trying to do something. Is this not just an added, benefit of being able to add that to your rider through Azione if you maybe don't have it or can't get it with your existing insurance provider?
And, John is going to be able to attest to this, maybe even more than me on the manufacturer side, is that awareness is key. And before you can build programs, you have to build public awareness of it first. So portions of this are important for that. But I'm sure that on the manufacturing side, they're going to take it leaps and beyond programs like this. They are going to come up with a way to protect things. And that's a little more important to me than an insurance policy.
Very good. And that's the perfect lead-in, because that was essentially my question to you, John, was obviously a lot of this rests on the dealer and the integration firm to know that A, their policies are up to date, B, hopefully they have this included on their insurance riders. And if they don't, and this is the first they're hearing about it, yeah, go do that. But how much of this rests with the manufacturer? How much of this comes down to the manufacturer teaching best practices so that your box that comes in the white and blue box is installed properly and is not an open gateway that allows something to come in?
So I think you hit on a huge point and something that we are in a unique spot for, right? I mean, if you look at where Crestron's products are primarily utilized, it's enterprise and government facilities, right? These are the same products that end up in the home. Our control processors, our touch screens, our video distribution equipment is, even our newest line, MVX, has security protocols, 802.1x, 802.1x, and Active Directory lookup. So you can't have something that sits on the network that's not secure. So I think we're in a unique spot now. Teaching those best practices and how to enable that and utilize that in residential space is another challenge altogether, right? And that's something that we're in the midst of working on right now. So and look, even as an integrator, when I was there, I'm only 2 years out of that side of the business. We had our insurance company had a clause that Joe's talking about that covered for cybersecurity. In fact, they would even attempt penetrations periodically into our systems and ask to try and penetrate some of our customer systems to go and see what the loopholes and flaws were.
Very good. John, and just to kind of pull on one of those points for a second, because so much of your stuff goes into commercial and government and some of those, commercial spaces, in those situations, a lot of times though, the integrators can rely on on-site IT, right? They're not necessarily the last line of defense when that device is going into that, university or that Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company. There are IT professionals that are managing that. How different is it? And I know you're specifically on the residential side, but how much of a different game is it when on the commercial aspect, you have that next level of people to fall back on, whereas residentially, we are the experts. We're supposed to be that last line.
I think that's exactly right. That is the that's the biggest point, is that in the residence, you own the network as the integrator.
Mm-hmm.
In the corporate and government side, you typically don't. You're connecting things to someone else's network, and they are the managers of who has access remotely and what things are open from the outside. And they also are setting standards as to what gets connected and how it's configured. So yeah, that is the biggest difference on the residential side when comparing to commercial. But I think that first step is having those capabilities, and there's probably a void there in most of the products that are out there right now.
Very good. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to our next story. This comes to us from CE Pro and the one and only Julie Jacobson. This is 10 reasons why Silicon Labs' acquisition of Sigma is awesome for Z-Wave. So if you don't know who Silicon Labs is, they are the leading silicone provider for most of the key IoT standards, and they have thus acquired Sigma Designs, who is the only manufacturer for Z-Wave home automation technology. Sigma's going to have to dump their smart TV business so that this sale can go through. But in this purchase, in this acquisition, Z-Wave is going to join the smart home portfolio that includes Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, Thread, and a bunch of other proprietary technologies. John, let's kick this off with you. How much of a big deal is this specifically for, obviously, Z-Wave and the Z-Wave Alliance, but specifically because something that Silicon Labs does very well is they make essentially dual chips. So they'll have something where it has Zigbee and Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. How big of a deal is it going to be to potentially start to down the road very quickly see a Zigbee and a Z-Wave chip that is together, or is this just a better opportunity for Z-Wave just by itself?
So I think initially the first, if you look at Silicon Labs, they're also big behind setting standards, right, and getting these standards. So I think that's a big first step, because there was only one manufacturer of this chip previously, and now you have a bigger one who, like you said, can integrate other radios and devices into that ecosystem. So I think it's a tremendous step for Z-Wave in itself, and that you will probably start to see more products that incorporate multiple radios and other types of integration.
Very good. Joe, you and I, we've both known Z-Wave for a long time. We're good friends with many of the people in the Z-Wave Alliance.
Mr. Klein.
Yes, sir.
My buddy.
Because Z-Wave had only been produced by one company, and Sigma was not necessarily the size of Silicon Labs. Is this something that, essentially has hindered Z-Wave development being proprietary and being owned by the company it was versus where it can go now that it is owned by Silicon Labs?
It's kind of a weird thing to me because, when you look at these protocols and chipsets, everything that have been adopted, overall, especially in IoT and in some automation, Z-Wave has been more widely accepted than any of the other ones. Mm-hmm. Whether it be Bluetooth, Zigbee, anybody else, Z-Wave has been the go-to for the IoT platform, so to speak. It makes me think of, Z-Wave Alliance, right? So are we going to change this? And is this going to be the LPWA, the Low Power Wireless Alliance now? Because I think there's a possibility that we're going to see, I'm going to call them flex cards now, so that when you buy a Slodge lock, a Black & Decker lock, a quick set lock, it's one card that has both the Zigbee and Z-Wave profile built into it, because now it's under one roof. Now as a company, you can really make a big splash. Hell, throw some Bluetooth mesh in there too while you're at it. I mean, this could be a very big thing for the other brands it owns. Bluetooth, Zigbee, now you got some Wi-Fi in it. I think this could be a much bigger thing for the other brands, giving them further exposure. But now you bring on Z-Wave, which obviously has a strong security protocol, which is why it's been adopted so much. Believe me, very high on my list is to give Mr. Klein a call actually about this, because if anybody's going to know, he's going to know. But I think this is actually a very big, great thing for our industry if they don't shackle us. Being a monopoly of low power wireless connectivity.
Well, and I think you brought up a really good point, because Z-Wave has emerged as the leader, again, not having maybe the money behind it that Silicon Labs has at their disposal with their plethora of chips. Does this just open, just as you kind of mentioned, does this open the door to potentially bringing all the smart home devices? And your example of the door lock was perfect, because when you walk into a Lowe's or a Best Buy or wherever you buy your smart lock, there's columns with all the different tech. Is this going to produce and advance the acceptance? Not that we don't have great acceptance as it is, but no, but you see some of the confusion when you're talking to those clients where it's not, hey, Joe, can you come out to my house and do everything? You see the confusion when it's, hey, Joe, I want to kind of control one of my locks and maybe have, a camera. Is this going to be the thing that really allows smart home and IoT stuff to actually get beyond the tinkering level?
I hope so, but it might be the other way around.
You think it's going to make it worse?
I don't want to say worse, but I think
not as better.
Not as better. Combining all this, it's gonna make waves everywhere. I mean, it's gonna affect companies like, Control 4, who has primarily been Zigbee, and now we're starting to try to accept some Z-Wave. It's going to make an easier entrance from them, obviously, because they've been, dealing with Sigma designs for forever. When their disconnect has been having to deal with somebody else. I think it'll make it better for me, but at the same time, I think it's going to make a lot more mess acceptable or accessible to the end user, kind of in the IoT, do-it-myself community. It's going to kind of open some floodgates that we're going to have to deal with on the back end if manufacturers aren't extremely careful about what they're doing. This kind of opens some floodgates on both sides. I see it as being beneficial, but it's going to be like in John's court. What do manufacturers do with this when that's obviously going to bring a low cost technology, Z-Wave, now owned by a huge conglomerate. It's going to bring those prices down and make it even more acceptable to the manufacturers. And I'm pretty sure stuff like this is already on Crestron and John's radar.
So essentially what he's saying, John, is don't let us down.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, goodness. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to another story. This comes to us from Twice Magazine and mentions a couple of good friends of ours and the show. There we go. The Women in Consumer Technology announces their 2018 Legacy Award recipients. Included in this list are Stephanie Dismore. She is the VP and General Manager for the Americas channel at HP. Eden Goldberg is the Marketing and Business Development VP at InMotion Entertainment. Bonnie Perella is the Eastern Regional Sales Manager for Milestone AV. Heather Sidorowicz, who is a really good friend of the show and joining me this year as a brand new CEDIA board member. She is the owner and president of Southtown Audio Video. And the woman to watch is Megan Dutta, who is also a good friend of mine and everyone else here. She is the editor of Nube Media's System Contractor News. And the Carol Campbell Inspirational Award goes to Ellen Savage. She's a member program VP at the Consumer Technology Association. John, this is fantastic. Just that these women are being recognized for their leadership in retail sales and marketing, integration, publishing, in all these trade association segments. How important is it for the women in the industry who are really groundbreaking and doing a lot for the industry to be properly recognized?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, look, it's overdue. I mean, if you look, walk around CEDIA. What's male to female ratio, excluding, people working in the booths, right? I mean, but you look at the attendance of CEDIA, and it's in this year, I think at this past show, there were more women there. And it's awesome to see that women are finally being recognized in this industry. And secondarily, you're starting to see that part of the population within our industry grow.
Joe, when you look at this list, it's not all, it's a legacy award, but some of these women, and I'm going to be really delicate the way I say this, but some of them you wouldn't necessarily think are legacy, just given how long they've been in the industry per se. But you look at specifically, what Heather's done in the 10, 15 years she's been doing this, what Megan's done, these women have really excelled incredibly quickly. What is attributed to that across the board?
I have my take on this, and it's not just women, it's pretty much everybody all together. A very good example is if you look at awards like this, board members for the last 6 years, being seen and accessible is much different today than it was a decade ago. I mean, you can pretty much find anybody on social media. Mm-hmm. Like Heather, she's got massive exposure just about everywhere. It's much easier for people to find out what they do, what kind of programs they're involved with, how they're changing and shaping the industry. So you're starting to see a lot more of the newer names, like, mm-hmm. You and Heather becoming members of the board, and you, I think, might be historically the youngest board member of all times.
I'm waiting to get confirmation on that.
but now people are able to actually see what people are doing, mm-hmm. and not just award the dinosaurs that have been, sitting on the high seat for 2 decades, and they're like, oh, that's that guy. Yeah, he's that guy. Now you get to see these people that are really starting to affect change, are really starting to help our industry and kind of shape and mold things. And that's why we're seeing such different names now. Mm-hmm. And so many of these younger people that are really shaking it up. You and Heather are perfect examples. And one thing it's funny, I told her on social media when she said, I just can't see why you would give me this legendary award. And I'm like, Heather, you have no idea. You are a legend. Don't let anybody tell you different. You've plotted your course. You absolutely deserve this. But a decade ago, she wouldn't have even been seen. She'd have been that person in the background affecting change that nobody knew about. That's one of the powers that I think we have now, is that through the industry, through the trade association, through shows, and through publications, that really deserving people can actually get recognition now.
Well, and I think that's one of the keys, specifically in her case and, in Megan's case, what they've done. And I think I've known Heather for maybe 6 years now, and I've known Megan for 4 to 5. But what the two of them specifically, and I mention them because I know them best as far as these 6 ladies are concerned, but what they've been able to affect and what we've been able to see over those last couple of years has been so influential, whereas even 15 years ago, they could be just as influential, but it would have been locked down to a smaller circuit. And this is true no matter who you are. What you can do and what you can reach is so much, it's such a broader reach today than it has ever been in the past. And just to clarify, Joe, when you were talking about dinosaurs, you were talking about yourself, not John, right?
I think me and him both fit in the seat of the new dinosaurs. But you're absolutely right. I mean, take for example when John first came on the CEDIA board, he was still an HTP, he was still an integrator, still with an integration company, and a lot of information about John and his business dealings were very public. I mean, I learned things from what John was doing, and other people learned things from things that I'm doing and you're doing, Matt. And mm-hmm. there's kind of this community sharing now that kind of gets those names out there, people who are actually affecting change. And I think that's really important, because if you look at past award recipients of any of these type awards, even CEDIA awards, fellows, lifetime achievement awards, or board members. While they all did their job and they're all great people, during that time, there were most definitely people higher deserving, but nobody had heard of them. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't get a vote, or they couldn't get an award, or now is like a really good time for the actual cream of the crop to rise to the top, so to speak. Now we can actually all see, it's all transparent. It's kind of, for me, for our industry as a whole, it's kind of a magical time that we can actually see who are the right people for the job, and it's very visual, and there's some background. So all these people are extremely deserving. I mean, I was just saying before the show, Ellen Savage over at CTA, I mean, she's done a lot of things for a long time. Mm-hmm. And as far as, affecting women in our industry, she's been pretty influential of it. But once again, you kind of don't, if you don't know her, you don't hear anything till now. Yeah. So that's why I'm so, happy about this list, and then all the other things that CEDIA has been doing to kind of affect these changes towards diversity. I just think it's great.
It is fantastic. And my kind of final thought on this will be that I had the opportunity to go to one of the Women in CE breakfasts at a CEDIA, I think in Dallas or Denver. I can't remember which. And you kind of walk into that expecting to be one of the few men in the room because it's a Women in CE event. And that was one of the most eye-opening and encouraging breakfast meetings I've ever had in my life. If you ever get the opportunity to go sit in on one of those, definitely do it, whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter. They're doing fantastic things. And, again, just seeing this list is proof positive of that. But all right, gentlemen, that is all the time we have. Thanks so much for joining us. John, if people want to reach out to you, where can they do that?
Email is the best, jclancy@crestron.com.
Very good. Joe, thanks very much for joining me again. Where can people connect with you?
They can always reach me by email at joe@thethoughtfulhome.com, anywhere on social media @thoughtfulhome. And as always, you can always catch me at CEDIA or on one of AVNation's great podcasts.
Oh, thanks. For myself, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter and every other social platform, as well as soon at CEDIA stuff officially. But more importantly, please stop by avnation.tv, where you'll find this show and a wide variety of our other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our underwriters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you support them as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.